Okay, yes, I am here. Look, it takes me a long time to actually set up these tutorials when I'm actually covering rules, which is why it's taken me so long to actually jump in. So if you were wondering why I was late, that was actually the reason. Simply because there's just so many different things to put out, and I had to find a whole lot of stuff that I thought I had placed in easy to find locations, and in fact apparently I had not. So I do apologise for taking a bit of time to get here. Apparently I am watching the new Assassin's Creed game. Alright, get rid of that ad. Okay, so we're just going to make sure that everything is working correctly. I just want to make sure my camera is doing what it needs to be doing. Hi F Hubber, how's it going Sean? Hi Prep Cook to Survive. I am here. Overboard DM is here as well. I will be doing a cut down version of this, which of course will probably be almost ridiculous because I'm going to be covering a lot of different rules today. For those of you who are wondering, it's absolutely going to be happening. I'm going to cover heaps and heaps of things. And I just want to check my camera as well, just to make sure my setup is actually going to work properly. And yes, if you can hear me, that's good news. That means I'm the right distance from my microphone and I've put everything in place the way it's supposed to be, which is excellent news. So yes, there will be a cut down version if you want to skip past all of this. It's going to be released, I don't know, when YouTube publishes the thing as a full high definition version. Now, if you want to get access to the actual live streams, the thing with that is you usually have to be subscribed, hit the bell button and turned on your notifications to be able to access them later on if you're not going to be able to stick around, okay? So that's one of the things I would just point out. That's absolutely the case in the situation. The live stream will stay public until I do the edited version. If you are a patron, you will always get access to live streams. I make sure to release those so that people can watch them. Now, this is a very different format. Normally what I would do is read from my notes, and then what I would do is I would show you a whole lot of slides, but that's not what we're going to do. I'm actually going to roll dice. I'm going to go through each of the rules, and I'm going to sort of explain why we do this a particular way, how they work. I know that's often a question people have. So that means for you, I will be paying attention to the chat. I would appreciate if people would please say hashtag question or question in bold and give me the question you have. Okay, that way I can pick out your question and the rule that I need to cover with you. If there are really complicated rules I'm going to go through, trust me, I may not do them today, but I may refer you to a video I have already done, okay? Jean-Paul is one of my players, laugh out loud. It's good to know that the technical difficulties don't... No, mate, technical difficulties work all the time. All right, so people have probably had more than enough time to actually get into the room. So we'll do a quick intro, and then we'll get straight into all of the game rules we need to talk about today. And, there's just not enough space on this desk. If I could just have a bigger desk, would that actually matter? I think, honestly, it wouldn't matter. I think it would make things easier to a certain degree, but probably not solve my problems completely. Okay, so hopefully this is going to work. There we go. Let's do that. Let's get into it. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons 5e as it happens, and absolutely you are correct. Would you believe it? I'm going to cover Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules. This is a tutorial, which means I'm going to actually show you how to do that with dice and miniatures and a battle map. And that's exactly the intention today. There are select monsters I have picked to make my life more easier, and I have selected some characters. So the characters I'm going to use are directly from the Dungeons & Dragons starter set that has the Lost Mine of Phandelver in it. So I'm using, I think it's 2 fighters, a cleric, a rogue, and a wizard, which kind of looks like the sorcerer elf there. So let's get straight into it and explain exactly what's going to go on. I'm going to cover a number of rules. We're going to go over advantage, disadvantage, all the quirks around that. I'm going to go through ability checks, skill checks, very similar, group checks, passive checks, not just passive perception, but passive checks. I'm going to cover saving throws, initiative, movement, dodging, dashing, disengaging, interactions, melee and ranged attacks, and yes, we will probably see in play some spells being cast. I will cover those as well. So, as you can see, I have lost my mind yet again. This usually happens from time to time as I'm running my channel, where I decide to do something stupid like cover too many rules in one video, and today is your lucky day. So, sit back, get ready, here we go. We're going to start off with the first rule that I want to cover, and that is actually advantage. Now, you'll find advantage on page 173 of the Player's Handbook. It's right there. It's pretty simple. It's a very basic mechanic, and usually the concept behind advantage is you see this 20-sided dice. Okay, this is a D20, and usually when you're making a skill check, ability check, saving throw, attack roll, things like that, anything that revolves around rolling a 20-sided dice, okay, advantage is instead of only getting to roll one of these dice and adding a modifier or a number to that, we get to roll 2 dice, okay, and we get to take the highest result, which of course is exactly what we want. It's the best chance of success. So if I was doing, say, a skill check with, say, passive perception, would be one of our checks we don't roll dice with. But if we're making a perception check for, say, our fighter with the great axe over here, we can do that. Now, you look on the character sheet, it's usually in the section right beside where all of the ability checks are. It's on the left-hand side, okay? And we look down there, we find perception. The perception modifier is a 3, which is awesome because that makes life fairly easy for us. So that's a 3. And we're going to roll a 20-sided dice. So 3 plus whatever we roll on our dice. So I'll roll my dice. I rolled a 14. Now, there are certain circumstances that would allow us to have advantage. The result right now for our perception check is 17. Okay, which is pretty good. But if we want to increase our chances and the Dungeon Master or you have an ability that allows you to have advantage, you get to roll 2 dice. So I'm still going to keep the result of that 20-sided dice that I rolled, but I'm rolling another dice as well, okay? And I get a 3. And of course, in this case, we take the highest result, which was the 14 rather than the 3 on the red dice. So we'll do that one more time just to give you a basic idea of how that works. So instead of just grabbing 1 dice, we grab 2 dice, advantage, roll, take the highest result. I got an 8 on the red dice, and I got an 18 on the wooden dice. So we go 3, which is our perception modifier for the fighter with the axe, and then we go 18, add that together, and we get 21. There we go. So that's advantage. Now, one of the things about advantage is sometimes there are circumstances where you may have more than one circumstance that it gives you advantage. Maybe the Dungeon Master gives you advantage because, for whatever reason, you're in a good vital location, you've got a really good view of where you are, and you've also got inspiration. You decide to use inspiration. The thing is, if you have 2 or more applications of advantage on the same dice, you can only use 1. Advantage doesn't stack. Okay, that's one of the bummers. Okay, now when you're doing a passive check, which I will explain later, advantage also imposes an adjustment to it, but we'll get to that very, very shortly. Okay, let's talk about something like disadvantage. Disadvantage, now we're going to play this out slightly differently. I'm going to pick out a different skill, mostly because I think it's kind of fun. Imagine that you are in a position where it's very, very dark, and sometimes there are monsters that can't see in the dark. It doesn't even matter if they have dark vision, because if you're far enough away, they still get disadvantage. Okay, that's because the view that they are getting is classified as dim light rather than bright light. So one of the things that people tend to forget all the time with regard to dark vision, most creatures tend to seem to have this thing, and most of the races in Dungeons and Dragons, apart from humans, and I think there's one or other I can't remember. Oh, Dragonborn, that's right. Why can't they see in the dark? So what we're going to do in this case is, instead of just rolling 1 dice, we're going to get to roll 2 dice because we have disadvantage. Same thing, it's our perception check. Now this works at a certain distance. I can't do that distance here on the map because if I did, although I can move these things back a little bit without it getting too complicated. Okay, all right, there we go. We'll just shift them back. Disadvantage. There's our +3 for our perception. And now we roll our dice as we would normally do. There's 11, so I'll add 11. So 3 and 11 is 14. That's what we've got. Okay, but disadvantage because classified as dim light. We're in a dark location. It's at night. You've got dark vision, so we get a disadvantage. If you did not have dark vision, you couldn't see diddly squat unless you had a light source. So we roll 2 dice. So I'm going to take the 11, put it over here, and we'll roll another dice. I got a 7. So instead of getting to use that 11, I have to use the 7. Disadvantage means when you roll 2 dice, you take the lowest result. All right, so get rid of the 11. I know you like the 11, but it's gone now. And then we're going to add 7. That means it's only a 10. That's our perception check in this situation with disadvantage. Now, it can apply to many different things. You can have disadvantage, like I said, to attack rolls, saving throws, ability checks, skill checks, anything that rolls a 20-sided dice. Okay, now, what happens if you have a 20-sided dice roll you're going to make, but for whatever reason you have disadvantage applied to the roll and you have advantage applied to the roll? Well, here's the funny thing. They eliminate each other. They cancel each other out. It also means if you have multiple occasions where you have disadvantage, you only apply one of the dice. So disadvantage doesn't stack just like advantage, okay? You can't have multiple dice and then you roll like 3 dice and take the lowest result. That's not normally how the game rules work. Just to give you a basic idea of how that is going to operate at your table. Now, when it comes to something like, now disadvantage is on the same page as advantage. It's on page 173 of the player's handbook. Now with something like an ability check, which can cover many different things, and I'm just going to rub this out, and I want to do an ability check with regard to something like stealth, because stealth is one of the skills we tend to use a lot. In this situation, I'm going to select a character that would probably have a reasonable stealth. So our level 1 rogue, everything is at level 1, starter kit, remember, that's what I said. So we look down the left side and we look for the word stealth. Stealth modifier in this case is a 7. Have I got a dice that I can mark as a 7 to make life a little bit easier? So you can see, there we go. These red dice are pretty good. They stand out pretty well. Okay, so that's our modifier for our stealth. I don't want to try to explain how to calculate those. That's much more difficult and that can be done in a different video. So our rogue is sneaking up and we would make a stealth check if the dungeon master requests us to do so. Okay. It's also classified as a skill check. So let's do this. We roll our dice. I got a 10. So for stealth, hopefully I can spell it right today. There we go. Stealth, 7 is the modifier. I rolled on the dice 10. So we add 10. We get a total of 17. That's our stealth check. Okay? It's a skill check, but it's also an ability check. For those of you who are wondering, what's the difference? Well, the difference is usually with a skill check, there's a specific skill, and there aren't too many skills in Dungeons & Dragons 5e that's spelled out. And you, in some cases, you might be proficient or trained, which means you get your proficiency bonus added to it. But in other cases, you may not. And then it's really just an ability check. Okay. Now, a good example of an ability check would be if I were to have, say, the fighter come over here and there's a statue right here and they try to push it over. We want to push over that. Now, what is that going to be? That's a strength check. Okay. That's another type of ability check. So we're going to go strength. There we go. And what is the modifier for that particular character? Well, we look down the left side and you'll find on the left side there's a section that says strength right at the top on the left side. And there's a score, which is the 16. and the modifier, and that's what we want, the modifier, it's a smaller number, so it's a +3. So we're only dealing with a +3 to that check. There we go for our strength. They're not that strong. Nah, strength, actually +3 is pretty high. Okay, so we roll our 20-sided dice as we did before. I rolled a 20. Now, 20 is awesome. In some cases, if you were making an attack roll, that's considered a critical, which means you automatically succeed or hit the target. In this case, it's only an ability check. Ability checks where you roll a 20-sided dice and you get a 20 do not classify as an automatic success. So we still have to calculate the number. So we go 20 plus 3 is 23. And that is our number. Now, with something like a ability check, which is our strength check to push over the statue, the Dungeon Master will set what's called a DC, or difficulty class. They won't necessarily tell you what it is until you have rolled your dice. They may, but they don't have to. Now the DC in this case, I'm going to set it, I'm going to make it up. Okay, I'm going to say it's hard. So hard sits in the range of a 20. So that means we were successful, we push over the statue. That's an ability check. Ability checks can be found on page 174 of the player's handbook. Okay, so we've covered ability checks and skill checks. Skill checks are also on page 174. There are a lot of other different types of skill checks we can make. So I'm going to get rid of this for a second. One of the most common ones that I tend to demonstrate are perception and stealth because they get called out the most. But in a situation like this, we may also want to make something like a knowledge check. It's also a type of skill check. And there are really only a very small selection of skills we can select from. In this case, we want to make a knowledge check on something like this creature here. What the heck is this thing? As we get closer and we can see what we're dealing with, okay, we can try to make a check. I would say in this situation, because I know as the Dungeon Master, it's what's called a mummy, okay? A mummy is a terrible creature that does all sorts of horrible things to you. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a knowledge check on that. What sort of knowledge would we use? We can use religion, because there's a skill for that, or a knowledge check for that. We could also use something like arcana. It's really up to you. I feel like with something like a mummy, it means you can probably translate those over pretty easily. With something like the gargoyles here, okay, as a Dungeon Master, I know it's a gargoyle. The players might not know it's a gargoyle. I would probably use something like an arcana check. That's like a magic knowledge check of some kind. But we're going to go with the mummy for now, just so that you've got a fairly good idea of how that works. So we're going to do a arcana skill check. So arcana. Now you'll find that on the sheet. Now we're going to get the wizard to do that, because wizards should be good at this sort of thing. If they're not, I think you did something wrong when you were selecting your skills. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure there are lots of wizards out there in the world who have no knowledge trained in arcana. So I hate to meet anything that you have to deal with later on, but it's not a good idea. Anyway, so the actual score is a 5. Okay, the modifier for that skill is a 5, so we'll turn it to a 5. And we go there, that's 5. So we roll our 20-sided dice. You can see how we use the 20-sided dice so much. Roll our dice, I get a result, I get a 10. So 10 plus the 5 is 15. There we go. All right, so remember with the skill check that we compare it to a DC or difficulty class that the Dungeon Master determines. Well, I would say as the Dungeon Master, for me, I'm going to set my DC to know anything about this thing at 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. So depending on how well they do, depends on how much information as the Dungeon Master I will reveal to the player based on their knowledge check. So we're going to flip the card, and some of the things I might reveal because they got a 15 is, okay, they know this creature is a mummy. They also know it's undead. It's definitely going to be very dangerous. And also it has a couple of features. Things like it has rotting fists and it has a dreadful gaze. So it can look at you and scare you. It also has the ability to make a series of attacks against you. So those are the sorts of things I would probably reveal if I got a DC 15. So I'm giving them, I would say 10 is sort of very common for somebody who knows what they're talking about, and then 15 is like medium difficulty, and then if anything else beyond that, okay, I would say I would set those DCs at say 20, 25, 30, making them much more difficult. And that's for somebody who's trained. If they're not trained, I might do it a little bit differently. Okay, so our DCs can range. They don't necessarily, with a skill check, as you can see, they don't necessarily have to be just one number. They could be a series of numbers, like a knowledge check, and you pick the number that represents how well they did. Okay, so if they get 15, that's the knowledge that they get. They won't get 20, 25, or 30, whatever information they would get from that, they're not going to get. I've already done a monster knowledge check video for those of you who want to go and check that out. I recommend to players who are playing Dungeons & Dragons, please do me a favor, always ask your Dungeon Master if you can actually make a knowledge check about this particular creature. It's going to do the world of good to you. It's always good to know more about the creatures you're dealing with rather than less, okay? So please make knowledge checks about that. Okay, so the first thing I would say with regard to skill checks and ability checks, probably the most important aspect of the game. I know a lot of people fall back and say, no, it's attack rolls and saving throws. It's the combat stuff. But frankly, it's not. It's always going to be skill checks and ability checks. Why? Because the chances are that you will make more checks with the dice, with stealth and with perception in particular, than any other dice roll that you ever do at the game. Which is why it's always nice to be trained in perception, so you can actually spot danger, hear danger, smell danger, taste danger. Oh no, well, you don't usually go around licking monsters, but you get my point. Okay, so now that we've done something like that, let's do something a little bit different. I think we definitely need to give you the opportunity to see what happens when we make what's called a group check. Now, group checks are probably the most common one is the stealth check, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be something else. You can also have a group check that's a perception check. You could have a group check that is revolving around something like athletics, if they're having to move across a location. Okay, anything that is on that sheet could be a group check. In this case, I'm going to use the group check with regard to something like stealth. It's probably, like I said, one of the most common. Now, there's another one that you'll probably find that you use a lot, but it's not actually a group check, but I'll come back to that. That's initiative. We'll talk about initiative very shortly, but not just yet. Let's start with just a group check with regard to each of these characters. I'm going to write down the names of each of these characters. I don't know how I'm going to deal with the two fighters, but we're going to do we'll go fighter, and then the one with the bow we'll call a ranger, which is not really a ranger, it's actually a fighter with a bow. And then we've got a cleric, and then we've got a rogue, and then we've got the wizard. And I'm going to have to turn this because I can't, I'm on my side here, so it's always difficult to do this otherwise. All right, okay, so there we are. There's our different characters. We have to make a dice roll for each one of them. It's a 20-sided dice roll, and in each case, I'm going to turn my red dice here to represent the modifier that we add for stealth. And we're going to make a stealth check for every single creature. Now, why are we doing that? Well, we're going to compare it to something else very shortly, and that's going to be a passive perception for our monsters. We have two monsters. We have a gargoyle and we have a mummy, okay? So let's make our stealth checks first. First one on top, let's do the wizard because I've got that right up in front of me right now. So we're looking for stealth down the left side. Okay, it's a +2, so we get our 2, and we roll our 20-sided dice. So we get a 19 for the wizard. Good on you, wizard. Okay, so 19 + 2 is 21. So we're going to roll, and we've got 21 as our number. There we go. That's our first number. Next, after the wizard, let's do the fighter. This is the fighter with the axe. Okay, so what's the modifier for stealth? Well, unfortunately for them, they have a star beside their stealth. That means they get disadvantage. Remember how we were talking about disadvantage? Roll 2 dice, take the lowest result. That's because they're wearing a particular type of armor. It makes them very heavy and clanky, and so therefore their modifier is actually a -1. It's not actually 1, it's actually -1. It's much less than 0. Okay, so I'm not even going to put that number on there. That'll just confuse you. And we have to roll these dice and take the lowest result. You can imagine their stealth check is going to be really bad. Okay, so I got a 19 and I got a 5. Take the lowest number, which is the 5. I have to -1 because that's the stealth for this particular character. That's a 4. That's not very good. Okay, all right, moving on. Next character. This is the character with the bow, which I'm classifying as the ranger. It's not really a ranger, it's just a fighter with a bow. Our modifier for that, down the left side, stealth is +3. So we go, all right, there's our red dice, there's a 3. We're adding that to whatever we roll on this dice. There's no star beside it, so they're not wearing heavy armor. Okay, I got an 11. So 3 plus 11 is 14. There we go, there's our number. We've got 2 more numbers to roll, and then we're ready to compare our check and see how it works against our creatures. All right, so our rogue has a stealth of 7. Now remember how we did that stealth check before? I wish I had kept that dice close by. There we go, there's a 7. So we're going to get rid of that 6-sided dice because that's not going to go up high enough. When you use 7 as our modifier, we roll our 20-sided dice. I got a 20. So that means that the rogue got 27. 7 plus 20 is 27. That's our stealth check. They're trying to sneak up on the monsters. Okay, so we've done our rogue, and the last one should be the cleric. The cleric, fortunately for us, probably won't be quite as complicated. Oh no, it is. It's a -1 again. So we get rid of this dice. We take back that disadvantage. So the cleric's wearing heavy armor. So they've got a star beside it. The star means you have disadvantage. It's -1. I'm not going to put that dice out because that'll confuse you. We roll these dice. We take the lowest result. I rolled a 14 and a 2. Take the lowest result is a 2 -1 because that's the modifier for stealth for that cleric. And they get 1. Okay, so there's our numbers. This is a group check. Now the idea behind the group check is as long as half of the group succeed on the DC that you have to hit, everybody is successful. Okay, that means that everybody is successful. Now we've got to compare it to 2 different numbers. The gargoyle have a passive perception, and their passive perception is going to be listed on our little card here, if I can find the sodding thing. Where is it? Passive perception. Oh, there we go. It's very low. So it's just a 10. So passive perception is usually 10 plus whatever your skill modifier is. Okay? In this case, it's got no modifier, so we just add 10. So, which characters were successful on trying to sneak up on the gargoyles? Well, the ranger got more than 10. So we're all good. So did the rogue. And so did the wizard. So 3 of them are successful. That means the whole group are successful on being stealthy and sneaking up on the gargoyle. Because those who get the higher scores pull those up who are doing a really bad job of making their check and being quiet and sneaky. They pull them up and improve them. That's the whole concept behind it. It doesn't mean that if one person does a really bad job of making their check, everybody suffers. That's not how it works. That's just the gargoyle. We've still got to deal with the mummy. It's possible the mummy will be slightly different. And in this case, I believe all right, I'm looking here. There's our sheet. And there's nothing there that indicates anything other than a perception check of 10, which is pretty poor. Wisdom's only 10. Add 10, so we get 10. So the same thing applies with the mummy. Now, I know a few of you are kind of confused, and there'll be people out there who don't like something like the group check, but I remember how we used to run group checks, and it was always, one person failed, the whole group failed. I think this is actually a better way of doing it. Does that mean that the monsters will be able to potentially get surprised. I know a lot of people want to talk about stealth and surprise, and I've done like a bucket load of videos. Okay, there's at least 5 different videos that break that down in detail. 2 for surprise, maybe even 3, and about 5 on stealth. And those are the videos you want to go and check out rather than me try to explain them. It would take me too long, okay? And I want to keep moving. And we're staying on this topic probably too long. So we're going to keep moving, and we've covered our group check. So you only have to have the group succeed. Half the group succeeds, the whole group succeeds. It's a very, very simple mechanic. It works well, and I know there'll be some dungeon masters who don't like it, but that's fine. I understand. Okay, now we were talking about passive checks. We've already used something called passive perception, which is when you add 10 plus whatever your skill modifier is. But you can make other checks that are passive. If we didn't have any monsters here, let's just remove them. There's no monsters here. And instead, our character decides to move over here, and they want to try to shift or move the statue, go back to the statue. You don't have to roll dice. You could decide to make what's called a strength ability check or a skill ability check, and instead of it being a dice roll, you decide to use a passive check. So let's go something like athletics. Athletics is a good one to attack because it's easy to deal with. You can use it for climbing trees, athletics. It's a climb check. And the strength and ability check, the strength check for our fighter here is a +3. So that's the ability check. But their athletics is a +5. So let's use the +5. I think that's reasonable, okay? And we're going to be doing a athletics check to move the statue. So athletics. And that's right. You have to wait while I write down a word. I do apologize. This is the nature of a live tutorial. Okay, all right, so we don't have disadvantage and we don't have advantage. So we're going to get rid of that dice. We're only going to roll 1 dice, and that's red dice there. That's our modifier. Okay, that's athletics. And I rolled an 8. So 5 plus 8. Oh, can I do maths anymore? I think I may have forgotten even how to add. No. So sorry. That's a 13, I believe. So we get a 13. So that's our check to try and push it over. Now we compare that with the DC that the Dungeon Master has determined, or difficulty class, and maybe we set the DC as at 15. It's medium difficulty. So we're not successful. We got less than what was required. If we got equal to or greater than and we succeed, we push the statue, okay? But there's another way of improving our chances with something like this, okay? There's another way of doing that. And that is we ditch rolling the dice. This is the passive check. Get rid of that. And we say, well, they're just taking their time. And we add 5 to the athletics. 5 athletics, 10 for a passive check. Whoops, comes out at 15. That means we're now successful. And we used a passive check. Okay, athletics, passive. And we didn't roll any dice whatsoever. And you can do that with any skill. Any skill whatsoever. If you decide there's no real chance of any significant failure, then use a passive check. In some cases, you can still use a passive check, even if there's a chance of failure, simply to hide the numerical value from the players so they don't know what it is. There's another reason why we use the passive check, and that's to stop people from metagaming, which often will happen at a table if you're not careful. Okay, so moving on. Now, as I said, if you have questions, you need to write down #question and then write the question. Otherwise, I won't see it. Okay. Question, first video on rules going to simplify by avoiding multi-classing stain. Really, Fred Hubbard, really, that's That's the information you want to put forward? Okay, all right. Okay, moving forward, let's do the next rule. And that is, we've done group checks, we've done passive checks. What about a saving throw? Saving throws are something that I probably haven't talked about enough in my my videos on my channel. But we will talk about a saving throw in this case. So we'll go saving throw. And there are lots of different, saving throws. There's actually 6. Each one related to the different ability checks. Okay? Each one related to the different abilities. So that is, there's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. We use some of these more often than others. You will find the actual saving throws for your character on the left near the top. Okay, it's just underneath the section that says proficiency bonus. And it gives you a number. And underneath that little box, it says saving throws. So that is the saving throw section. So we're going to make a saving throw. Again, I want to sort of relate it to something that could happen in your game. So I'm going to pick a creature that would force you to perform what is called a saving throw. Saving throws are usually a response. I know a lot of people want to say, okay, can I choose to fail a saving throw? No, not really. You can't. I know a lot of people would like to be able to do that, but that's not necessarily how it's supposed to work. So we're going to use what's called a banshee. Okay, a banshee is an undead creature. It wails, makes a heck of a lot of noise. It generally tries to scare people, and in this case, we're going to use a banshee. Now, banshee has a strange ability where if you're at a certain distance from them, they can affect you, and they can affect multiple individuals, which makes them incredibly dangerous. Okay, so saving throw. Now, the saving throw I'm going to use for the banshee is called the wail. A banshee releases a mournful wail, provided that she isn't in sunlight. There's no sunlight. We're saying it's dark. There's forest canopy, so forth. It's dark location. Maybe it's at night as well. Okay, this wail has no effect on constructs or undead. All other creatures within 30 feet, so all of our characters are within 30 feet. If they can hear her, they have to make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw. On a fail, the creature drops to 0 hit points. On a success, the creature takes a certain amount of damage, which is 10, or you roll 3 6-sided dice worth of damage. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually play out the wail. We know what our DC is because the monster stat actually tells us, so we know the DC is a 13. So we're going to make a check for that. So we're going to start off with something like the fighter. I think the fighter is a good example of somebody who should be able to fight off the effects of a banshee. Not necessarily the case, but sometimes they should be able to. All right, so how does that work? So looking on the left side near the top for saving throws, we look for Constitution because it's stated we have to use a Constitution check. What is the number? It is a +4. So let's get a red dice, +4, and we're going to roll a 20-sided dice where there's no adjustment to it. Okay, just that, +4, that's what the saving throw is. There's no advantage, there's no disadvantage. Take the 20-sided dice, roll 20-sided dice, I get a 3. Okay, so 4 + 3 is 7. All right, so that means that fighter with the great axe failed. What happens when they fail? They fall to 0 hit points. Doesn't matter how many hit points they have, they're now unconscious. Okay, bad news for that particular character. Okay, so we're going to keep doing this because it's fun for me. I like the idea of showing people just how nasty one of these little creatures can be. DC 13 Constitution saving throw. Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed? Okay, so moving along, let's do the next character on our list. And I think the next one, we'll do the cleric. They have a saving throw for Constitution of +2. Okay, that's their modifier. It's in the same location as the fighter on the character sheet. So I roll a 20-sided dice, and I got, I believe that's a 1. Now, 1s don't mean automatic failure. With a skill check or a saving throw or an ability check, it's not automatic failure. That only applies to an attack roll. So we get 1 equals 3. So 2 + 1 is 3. It's less than the DC that we needed to get. So the cleric is now on 0 hit points. Oh gosh, I love banshees. They're under-resourced, underutilized, and terrifying in every nature. Okay, so the rogue. Let's try the rogue. Another saving throw. The DC or Constitution DC modifier is a 1. It's not very high. So 1 plus whatever we roll on that 20-sided dice. I rolled a 20. That's good news. 20 equals 21. So 1 plus 20 is 21. So we succeed. That's good news. That means that this character here, our rogue, is not going to go to 0 hit points. Instead, they take 10 psychic damage. Or we roll 3 6-sided dice and determine how much dice there or damage is going to be made. Now we could do that, but first I want to point out just a couple of things. For those of you who are dungeon masters, you might find this useful. How many hit points does our first level rogue have? On the character sheet for the starter set, there is only 9. That means that the rogue, if it takes that 10 psychic damage, that average, you can use the average damage, that's fine, they would be unconscious anyway. So this is a time when I would suggest giving the players the opportunity to possibly make it. So grab the 6 dice. This is probably one of the few times I would actually roll dice for damage rather than use the average, because there's a chance I could roll really badly, but otherwise that character goes down. If you don't care about that sort of thing, that's fine. So I roll those dice. So I got a 3, a 3, and a 2. So how much is that? 3, 3, and 2, 3, 6, 8. 8 damage. So they would take 8 damage, but they have 9 hit points. They're left with 1 hit point. You can see why I would select to roll the dice rather than take the average in this case. Because sometimes it's better to do that, particularly when you know the outcome is going to be pretty severe for the players. So I'm going to use the dice roll, because I think that's the better idea in this situation. Bit of a hint for those of you who are running monsters and find your characters going down too often. Okay, so we've done the rogue. Let's do another Constitution check, just so that we've made it absolutely abundantly clear how they are done. Let's do the fighter with the bow, or what I'm classifying as the ranger. Their Constitution saving throw is a 4. So we take the 4, and we're going to roll a 20-sided dice, 4, and I got a 16. So that is 4 plus 16 is 20. So they succeed, but they would still take average damage, or you roll 3 6-sided dice. And as I said, I think it's smarter to roll the 3 dice and potentially not take them out of a fight too quickly. Okay, so I rolled a 4, a 3, and a 2. So that's 6, 9 hit points. How many hit points does that fighter have? They have 12. So you could have rolled the dice, or you could have done the average damage, and the character would still be standing, okay? Because if it's got 12 hit points and you deduct a total of 9 hit points, then basically it's still standing. If you did, it's going to have 3 hit points left. If you deduct 10 using the average damage for this particular ability, rather than rolling the dice, it would have 2 hit points left because they have 12. 12 minus 10 is 2. Okay, so you can see how something like a saving throw works. Now, I could do one more because I want to just point out just how ruthless this creature is. Let's do the wizard saving throw. Now, the wizard has a Constitution modifier and saving throw of 2. Okay, that's its saving throw. So we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to roll some dice. Now, wizards are very, very vulnerable to damage at level 1. They will, when they take damage, it hurts a lot. It's entirely possible to take out a wizard fairly easily. Okay, so roll our 20-sided dice, no modifier, 2 plus 5. Okay, that's 7. We can already see what's going to happen, right? That means that they failed. They failed, they didn't succeed, they go down, they go to 0 hit points. It won't matter whether you use average damage or you roll the 3 dice, because if they fail, they go to 0 hit points, full stop. You can see how this monster could be absolutely devastating to higher level characters who are not very good at saving throws. Okay? Alright, let us go on to the next one. I want to talk about something like Now, with saving throws, you'll find that on page 179 of the Player's Handbook. Let's talk about initiative, because initiative is something you're going to use a lot. Initiative is quite a common mechanic, simply because it's probably one of the first things you will roll just before you enter a combat. So let us get rid of the Banshee, and we'll bring in a Shambling Mound, and we'll also bring in a couple of Helmed Horrors, because I'm not actually running a combat right now, and so I can be ruthless if I want to, and it's always fun to do that. I want to put these characters in some sort of order, and okay, so we're going to do initiative. The easiest way to do initiative is always to get your players to roll their dice, figure out what their modifier is, and then while they're doing that, you write down sort of a list of the characters' names. Okay, you write down the characters' names, and then once you've done that, then you ask them for their initiative score. Otherwise, if you try to do it as you're going, you'll always get lost. I always find my players are able to roll the dice and call out the numbers well before I've even had a chance to do anything. So it is always good to have this already pre-prepped in advance. Wizard, Cleric, and Rogue. There we go. All right, so there is our a list of different. Oh, now somebody has a question, and I think it is a legitimate question, because I can see that somebody has put in a question rather than trying to educate me. I will come back to a lot of the chat in here for those of you who are concerned that I may not answer a question, because that's entirely possible that I will come back. You'll find, say, Jason's first time Dungeon Master, second session, and what on this channel has been a great help. Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, so it wasn't actually a question. Moving along, so remember, hashtag question, otherwise I will not be able to pick it out of the chat, okay? Hashtag question and then write your question. Okay, so Jason, on the grid, how strict are you in movement, positioning? Some module text doesn't translate well. Okay, so first off, if you're using a grid, you're probably going to be fairly strict. If you're using Theatre of the Mind and you're not using a grid, then you wouldn't really bother, okay? In terms of how strict am I, one of the things I would say to you, and I experienced this at tables before with other Dungeon Masters, if you're doing this sort of thing, and a player is here and they're deciding about where they're going to move, and they go 5, 10, 15, oh no, I don't want to do that, I'm going to go back here, 5, 10, and you go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, okay, I want to be here, and I take my finger off, oh no, I've changed my mind. Please don't do the chess thing. You know, when you're playing chess, that game that's actually a proper strategy game, don't say if you take your finger off the miniature, you have to stay there. It's a terrible way to play the game, okay? Dungeons and Dragons is actually not a tactical game like chess, where taking your finger off a miniature is it. The only time it would be problematic is if your player is changing their mind a lot, and I can see where you might run into problems. I would personally, with new players, okay, you can usually tell they will make mistakes and have to try to figure things out. Your job there is to help them work through this. So it is much better to let them, okay, figure out where they started, which square it is. Okay, remember that square. Figure out where you want to go, and I will explain what will happen if you go there. Okay, so if you hold your finger there, or you get them to hold their finger there, and they figure out where they want to go and how far it is, counting out squares with fingers is fine as well. All right, that's probably one of the pieces of advice I would have for you. Okay. That's as strict as I would be in terms of the grid. All right, don't apply if you take your finger off the miniature. You have to be there. Now, Fred has said you can choose to fail a saving throw. Now, I would say to you that that's not what Jeremy Crawford has been stating. It is not their intention that you can choose to fail a saving throw. All right, just so that you are aware. It is not intended. All the things in terms of a saving throw are related to something that's happening automatically rather than something that you have control over. Saving throws aren't really something you have control over. Moving down here really quickly. Okay, Epic Donut. Question. Do you like how initiative works? I've been trying to find faster and easier alternatives. So I'm going to show you how initiative works in a second, Epic Donut. I've already done a couple of videos on different ways of doing something like initiative. If you want to use a different initiative system, you can. There are lots of different ways of doing it. What I think is probably the smartest way is to get everybody to roll a couple of different initiative rolls and then just put them in a list or in a line at the very beginning of your session before you even start playing. This eliminates your requirement to get them to wait for them to pull out dice, roll dice, add up numbers, okay? If you do that all at the very beginning and then collect all those numbers, you as the Dungeon Master have so much more control about when you actually get the combat moving rather than having to wait as they roll dice. It's one of the things that tends to slow things up a lot. I also use what's called group initiative. And there's a video on that topic. You're welcome to go and check it out. Group initiative. I use it all the time. It makes combat really fast, much more streamlined, but it does also require fairly experienced people. So if you're dealing with new people, start slow and work up to it. So let's do initiative, because I said I was going to do initiative and we haven't done that yet, have we? All right, so we're going to do initiative. Initiative is what you roll before the combat to determine who goes in the turn. All right, it is a 20-sided dice roll. Where do you find that number? Usually most people get really confused when they look at their character sheet. It is right down the middle. It is between the armor class and the speed of the character near the top. And it says initiative. And in this case, our wizard has a +2 for their initiative. We roll a 20-sided dice, we add that +2. Okay, that's what we're going to do. And we'll do that for every single character. Once we do that, we then add we put all of those numbers into order from highest to lowest. Whoever has the highest number is going to go first. Okay, so roll some dice, Fred. You've been talking too long. Okay, 7. So 2 plus 7 for the wizard comes to 9. That is their initiative. Next character. Now, for those of you who don't necessarily have a character sheet that has initiative on it, usually your initiative is also your dexterity modifier. That's the small number over on the left side near the top that says dexterity, and there's a number. For the wizard it says +2, and their dexterity score, it's a big number, that's the 15. If you are proficient, you would also add your proficiency bonus to this. But unfortunately, most characters are not proficient with initiative. Otherwise, that would create all sorts of very, very problematic issues. Okay, it's very unusual for that to be the case. So we're going to go to the next character. Our fighter with the great axe has an initiative of -1. You don't even have 0, it's -1. We'll get rid of that red dice because that's not going to help us. Remember, -1. I rolled a 2, -1 is 1. That's really bad, right? It's not good at all. Keep going. We'll do our cleric. At the top, -1 for the cleric. So they have a really bad dexterity modifier. So that's -1 as well. So we'll roll a 20-sided dice. So 12 -1 is 11 for the cleric. Not as bad as the fighter. Next, initiative. We're going to do the rogue. Now the rogue has a really good dexterity modifier. It's +3. Their initiative is +3. You can see how it's related. Okay, so we'll get the 3. This is the rogue. And we add our 20-sided dice to that 3. So 3 plus 6 is 9. That's the initiative. Cool. Keep going. We've got one more. Did I put down the ranger? Whoops, wrong one. That's the ranger. We want the rogue. That's a 9. Okay, so let's do the fighter that has the bow, which I'm calling the ranger, simply because it's easier for me. Okay, they have an initiative of +3, so +3. Dexterity is 3, initiative is +3. 6-sided dice says 3, D20 says 5, that's 8. 3 and 5 is 8. Okay, so there's our numbers. So who is going to go first? Our cleric will go first. and then the rogue and the wizard, they've both got 9. Because they've both got 9, the players can decide amongst themselves who will go first. In the past, we used to use something like who has the highest dexterity modifier to determine who would go, or you might have decided, well, okay, we're going to use the initiative modifier. Whoever has the highest initiative modifier will go first if you have a tie. Or no, we'll have a roll off. You're going to roll a 20-sided dice, each of you, the wizard and the rogue. Whoever gets the highest result gets to go first. But it's much smarter for you to work as a group and think about strategy and about who would be better to go first. It's often better for a wizard to go before the rogue, so the rogue has somebody to set up the situation, because rogues need somebody to they either need to have advantage or they need to have somebody close by to allow them to use their sneak attack. So they need somebody who's within about 5 feet. It's a level 1 character, it won't really matter, so you decide how that's going to work. So it'll be the cleric, followed by either the rogue or the wizard. They decide. Then our ranger will go next, and then our fighter. Now, I haven't rolled a initiative for the monsters, but that's what you would normally do, is you would normally also roll initiative for the monsters. Now, I've got a card here. I want to show you this so you can see how it works. Now, for those of you who need like a breakdown on how to actually run an entire combat with dice and miniatures, I have one on the Yeti, I have one on the Minotaur, I have one on the Beholder. I think I've even got one on a few other creatures as well, which you're welcome to go and check out. Just look up tutorial or combat tutorial, you'll find them. Okay, so our Helmed Horror. I just want to move this around a little bit just to make you more confused than you were before. But we also need to make a check for initiative and put them into order, and that's our monsters. Okay, our monsters also get to take a position in the order from highest to lowest. How do I figure this out? So looking at your monster sheet, you won't see initiative on it. There's never a square or a box or a section that says initiative on the stat block for a monster. So you have to look at dexterity, and you look at the dexterity, and it's the modifier you're looking for. In this case, the modifier for a Helmed Horror is a +1. So that means our initiative is +1. That's our modifier. So Helmed Horror 1 plus, and I'll just put down here, Helmed Horror. Bam, just like that. We roll our 20-sided dice just like we've been doing before. I rolled a 5, so 1 modifier, plus the dice roll, 5 comes to 6. So then we place that number in the order with the characters. And that's when that monster will act. So they would be acting in the initiative based on what we rolled before with the other characters, and about the middle somewhere. Okay? Now, I know a lot of people will ask the question, what happens if I get an initiative score that is equal to one of the player's characters? What happens then? What if my monster has an initiative score that's exactly the same as one of the characters? The book stipulates the Dungeon Master decides how the system works. You can simply choose to have your monster act before the player, and I would recommend that because your monsters will get decimated pretty quickly usually. If you're dealing with a tough monster, you might not want to do that, but I think it's better to showcase what a monster can do rather than have the players smash them and focus fire and you never actually get to use the creature. You can roll a 20-sided dice, you can use whatever system you like, but it's at the Dungeon Master's discretion, not at the player's discretion. Okay? So that's why as a Dungeon Master, I would always go with, okay, my monster will go first even though I have tied with one of the player's characters. So let's do something like, now we've got a Shambling Mound here. So with the Shambling Mound, what we're going to do is we're going to roll initiative for that as well. This is this creature here, so I'm going to get rid of that Helmed Horror. As I said before, you won't find the modifier on there. You're just looking for the dexterity modifier. In this case, it's a -1. So get rid of that dice. That'll just confuse you. -1. So Shambling Mound makes initiative roll. Shambling Mound. Okay. there it is. Roll our 20-sided dice. We're going to be adding -1 to this. So that's -1. That's the dexterity for the creature. Plus 18 equals 17. Okay. That means the Shambling Mound, probably based on all the other initiative checks we made, is going to be going first because they have the highest number out of everybody else. I think the highest number the player's characters had was an 11, which is not very high. Okay, so that's initiative. And surprise also works in conjunction with something like stealth checks and perception checks, but too complicated to explain in a tutorial like this. It'll just confuse you and me at the same time. Okay, so working my way through the questions. Joseph, question, I don't know how to feel about instant kill abilities. Feels a little out of place. How do you feel about homebrewing high damage instead? Okay, so I want to explain to you, first off, Joseph, you're referring to a creature that reduces one of the player's characters to 0 hit points automatically, well, not automatically, but because they failed a save, right? Something like the Banshee. But I would like to point out that the Banshee's wail does not kill them, okay? It does not kill them. It drops the character to 0 hit points, okay? So if a character goes down, for whatever reason, and let's do something like, let's say that the fighter was taking on something like the Shambling Mound. Let's do a death saving throw, okay? Let's deal with death saving throws, because monsters almost never instantly kill anybody. I don't have a problem with character death because I have always viewed that if a character dies at my table, it's not me who decides whether the character continues being played or not. I always say to my players, do you want to continue playing this character or do you want to roll up a new character? I always allow my players to have control over that aspect. Even if they have no way of bringing the character back, they can negotiate with me to get the character back in the game if they want to keep playing it. So let's make some saving throws. So success, failure. Now the thing with success and failure is we can only do so many. Okay, and after that it's all over. So the horrible thing with a saving throw for death, when you reach 0 hit points, you're not necessarily dead. You're just dying. So we make a death saving throw. We take a 20-sided dice. Now if we roll a 20, the character gets 1 hit point back at the beginning of their turn, which means they can stand up and do other things. Okay, the saving throw for this particular check always occurs at the beginning of the turn. Okay, it doesn't take up the action, you just do it. That's it. It's automatic. Okay, so we take our 20-sided dice. If I roll a 20, the character gets 1 hit point back, is conscious, and can continue in the fight. If they get a 1 on the dice, then that's 2 failures. Not 1 failure, but 2. So don't roll 1s. If they get a 2 through to a 9, that's 1 failure. If they get a 10 through to a 19, that's 1 success. Okay? So let's roll some dice and see what happens. So I rolled a 7. 7's not super bad. That means the 1 failure. So when the turn comes around for the fighter, that's what they do, and they are still unconscious. They do nothing. So we roll again. I rolled a 6. That's another failure. Okay. New turn comes round. They make their check again. There's no modifier to add to this dice roll. Okay, for those of you who are wondering, what do I roll with this check? There is nothing that you actually roll with this. Okay? It's just this, nothing else. I rolled a 1. That's 2 failures. The character's dead. Okay? Because they failed 3 times. You have to fail 3 times. 3 failures, you're dead. Okay, so let's try that again, because I feel like we could do a little bit better, and it gives you a better idea of what's going on here. I did roll pretty bad. So if I roll again, let's say it's not the fighter that's down this time. Let's say the cleric went down and the fighter's still standing. Okay? I rolled a 9. That's still a failure. Gosh, am I going to keep rolling really low? Could well be. New turn comes round. Beginning of the cleric's turn. I rolled a 5. Oh God, I'm going to roll like this all night, aren't I? It's going to be one of those days. And a 6. Another failure. Okay, but it is possible Unless, of course, you have terrible luck like me with dice, and for whatever reason you just can't roll anything above a 10. It is possible for a character to get 3 successes and be stable. If you get 3 successes, you're stable. To get back on your feet, you have to roll a 20, or somebody has to heal you, okay, using healing magic. That's how the death saving throw works. And I have a very, very good video on it that explains this in a lot of detail, and you're welcome to go and check that out. Okay, I don't want to refer you to a page because I wasn't expecting to go over that particular aspect. What I want to do is I want to talk about movement, because movement is one of those great things. Dungeons & Dragons 5e does movement in a much more sensible manner in my way to thinking. You know, when you want to move somewhere, you don't want to have to move and then attack, or then attack and then move. It would be good to be able to do something else with it, right? And we can. So I want to cover movement very quickly. I know there are questions in the chat. We will get to you. Okay, so movement. My character, the fighter, has got a speed of 30 feet. On this grid, each square represents 5 foot. Unlike 3.5, moving diagonally does not cost extra movement. Okay? We're not using Pythagoras here. We're just counting squares. That's it. Okay, I don't want to get into an argument about which is more effective or anything like that. So 30 feet means this character can move 6 squares. Then they can take an action and make an attack or do something else. They can also take a bonus action, which is not the same as an action. They can use an interaction. So there's a lot of different things they can do. You can climb a tree with movement. You can crawl. You can swim. Lots of different things. So let's say we'll start off about here. So movement is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. There's my movement. I have moved through the area, used my movement. I still have my action, my bonus action, and an interaction if I want it. What if I want to do something a bit more complicated? Now, movement is more difficult when you're dealing with larger creatures and if you're using difficult terrain. But one of the great things about Dungeons & Dragons 5e is if you're dealing with difficult terrain, or you're crawling, or you're climbing, all you do is you halve your movement. So even though the fighter here with the great axe was able to move 30 feet because that's their movement speed, everything gets halved. So if they decide to crawl along the ground, they can only crawl 15 feet or 3 squares. So it'd be 5, 10, 15. Okay, climb a tree, 15 squares, or 15 feet. Yep, or 3 squares, 15 feet. If you want to move across difficult terrain, so maybe there's an area somewhere that's hard to move across, like rocks, or you're climbing up a mountain, okay, and it's more difficult to move around that location, or it's slippery. You just halve movement. It's very, very simple. You can find all the rules for movement on page 190 to 191 of the Player's Handbook, and I have plenty of videos that explain how to use your movement in a combat situation. Okay, let's talk about something like dodge. Dodge is one of those features where normally, actually let's do with dash, because dash is probably more significant to most people. So dash is when you get to move again, okay? It's an action to perform it. Dash can be found on page 192. So I could have my fighter here move their speed, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. They have moved. I still have an action. I can use my action to dash and move further. Now, a lot of people read the dash action and assume that they can move double their speed. That's not how it works. It just means you get to use your movement again. You can move your movement speed again. So that means I can go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So in total, by using my movement and my action when I dash, I've moved 60 feet. That's it. Okay? That's the dash action. Now, what about something like the dodge action? Very rarely do people use the dodge action, but it's actually a really good feature. Let's deal with something like this creature here. This is a helmed horror. Our fighter is taking on a helmed horror. Now, the helmed horror has a number of attacks. It has a long sword. Now, that long sword has a modifier of +6, but I could have my character move up to the Helm Tower, or the Helm Tower could move up to them. And during my turn, instead of using my action to dash or make an attack, I can take the dodge action. And we're going all Keanu Reeves Matrix style, okay? The idea is I am now harder to hit. How long does that last? It lasts not a turn, but the whole round, okay? You can find the rules for dodge on page 192. I've done a video on the topic as well. They got a nice picture of Keanu doing a little bit of a dodge the bullet, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to grab 2 dice, and when this Helm Tower attacks our character who is dodging, every attack they make is a disadvantage, which means they have to take the lowest result. It's one thing you want to do when you're dealing with a creature that makes multiple attacks, and a Helm Tower makes multiple attacks. And if you're dealing with a lot of different creatures all making attacks, taking the dodge action is a really good technique to stay in the fight. Now, why would you do this as a tank? Why would you do this as the frontliner? You're buying time for those near the back who are using bows and ranged spells to smash the monsters and take them down before you wind up getting hit and getting killed. That's the idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a check here. The modifier for our Helm Tower is a 6, which is quite high. And we're making an attack, but this is a dodge. Okay, dodge. So we're using 6 as the modifier for the Helm Tower. They're going to make an attack. Their multi-attack allows them to make 2 longsword attacks, which is bad news. It's not good. So we roll. I take the lowest result. I rolled a 14 and I rolled a 9. Okay, 14 and 9. Lowest result is the 9. We take that. We add that to the 6. That comes out at 15. We compare 15 to the armor class of the fighter. We have to get equal to or greater than. Fortunately for the fighter, this particular fighter has an armor class of 17. So 17 is the armor class to hit. And you can see, armor class 17, that's too low. It's not equal to, it's not greater than. So that first hit from the Helm Tower misses. So we're going to make another attack because it gets multi-attack, gets to make another attack, but this is still going to be at disadvantage, okay, because the creature, the fighter, is dodging. So we roll again. I roll a 13 and a 9. Am I rolling the same dice all the time? I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so 6 plus 9 is 15. We take the lowest result. It's disadvantage when you're dodging. Okay, what if the other Helm Tower decides to go after the fighter? You're in a bad situation, right? We do the same sort of thing all over again. We'll rub out this. Disadvantage for this creature as well. Okay, I rolled a 16 and I rolled a 19. So we take the 16, the lowest number. 16 comes to 22. So 22 will hit the AC of 17. So the first attack does hit. We're not going to roll damage right now because I'm going to deal with that later. Okay, right. Second attack. Okay, so we've got a 12 and we've got a 4. So 4 is good. 4 means the chances are the Helm Tower will not hit the target. Yep. So we go 6 plus 4 is 10. It's less than. So the Helm Tower with its second attack misses. You can see how out of 4 attacks, 3 have missed, only 1 has actually struck the target. Okay, and it's got a modifier of +6 to hit. So that's a really good thing to do. Dodge is underutilized, you should use it more. Okay, so that's dodge, which you can find on page 192 of the Player's Handbook. Okay, and I've got a video on the topic as well. So we've done that. Now, you can also disengage. You might decide this is too hard for me. I've lost too many hit points. I need to leave, but I do not want to provoke an attack, which you would do. If you try to leave combat, you provoke an attack. And I've done videos on attacks of opportunity. To do this, we're going to use our movement, which is 30 feet. And we're also going to take the disengage action. It's an action. You've got an action during your turn. You can use it as long as you're still standing. And when you do so, it doesn't matter where you move, the creatures can't attack you. So we can go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And we can start running away, and neither of those helmed horrors would get an attack on you. If you don't use the disengage action, when you leave the space that they threaten, so this creature here, right there, threatens this square. When you leave that square, this creature gets to attack. When you leave this square, this helmed horror gets to attack. So you have to use the disengage to avoid taking 2 more attacks. So that's one of the things you can do. You can also, if you decide that it's not going to work because they're just going to chase you down, you could decide to take the dodge action and flee. Now, the reason for doing that is even though you're going to get attacked, they would have disadvantage because you are dodging. So you use your movement, you dodge, you move your 30 feet, they miss, they can then pursue you and make more attacks, but you are still dealing with disadvantage for all of their attacks, which improves the chance of you surviving, okay? Particularly if you can't stay in the battle and keep fighting it out. Okay, let's deal with things like melee attack and a ranged attack. I think we have covered that pretty significantly. We've covered most of the details in that. I do want to just quickly go to the chat because I know there's a lot of questions flying around. I will do my best to answer as many questions as I can. As I said, hashtag question to get me to answer your questions. Hashtag question in bold. Otherwise, it's not going to work for you, okay? I won't get to you. Right. Stop using hashtag question to put in silly comments, please. If you want to make a silly comment, you could do that, but don't do it while I'm trying to answer questions. It's not helpful. All right, so moving through here, looking for questions with hashtag question. I think we've covered, oh, there we go. There's an actual question. Question from, is it Matthew Castro? If I got your name wrong, I do apologize. Question, I have a -1 strength monk. He is a wood elf with a 90 speed, with the step of the wind. Am I able to jump from a tree to another tree? I get that I can jump 2 feet up, but how many feet forward? Okay, so the jumping rules, very, very simple. Whatever your strength score is, not the modifier, but your strength score, that's how many feet you can jump. So if we're dealing with this particular character here and they want to jump, as long as you have a running jump of at least, it has to be at least 10 feet, you can use your strength score as the distance, okay? So their score is a 16, which means that this character can jump a total of 5, 10, 15, 16 feet. So they can get across a space that's 15 feet, okay? Easy peasy. As long as they have a long running jump, which is 10 feet, you've got to have a run up of at least 10 feet. Problem is, every feet that you jump is half speed. So you will have to burn up your movement and your action to take the dash action to get across 15 feet wide space. Okay? That's how your jump works, the long jump. So I've answered the long jump question. Well done. A lot of people always miss this particular rule. It's hard to find in the book. I do totally understand if you have trouble with it. And high jump works different to the long jump for those of you who are wondering. Joan, question, cover and concealment mechanics, how they work and positioning, high ground, low ground, tactically things. Okay, so first off, Dungeon Masters decide if high ground gives you an advantage and whether having the low ground gives you disadvantage or any kind of adjustment, okay? It is not written into the rules. There is basically 3 types of cover. There is half cover, so the dice here covers about half the miniature. That would be half cover from a creature over here, okay? If we had another dice in front, we might classify that as 3/4 cover, okay? But if we had to put something much bigger in front, that would be total cover. So half cover, half the creature is covered, that is a +2 to the armor class of the fighter. So they have a 17, it becomes 19. If they have 3/4 cover, they get a +5. So 17 + 5 is 22. If you have total cover, you don't have to worry about your armor class because the creature can't strike you from there. You cannot be seen. Okay? You cannot be seen, you cannot be targeted unless they're dealing with an ability that has a saving throw which applies some sort of area effect. Area effects can get around total cover in some cases, but usually not usually. That's a bit more difficult to do. Okay, so that is the cover and concealment. And I can't cover all of the aspects of cover and concealment. I want to cover making attacks. I think that's one aspect of the game that a lot of people like to actually talk about and want some sort of guidance on. So we're going to talk about making a melee attack. Okay, melee attack. This is a close quarter attack. And I'm going to use my fighter for the melee attack. Now, what are we looking for when we make this attack? If I'm going to use something like my great axe, which I do, it's a close quarter weapon, on the pre-made character sheet for the Dungeons & Dragons starter set, this character has a +5. So that's 5 is our modifier. We add that to any 20-sided dice roll. Okay, we don't have advantage, we don't have disadvantage, we just roll 20-sided dice. I rolled a 3, so 5 plus 3 equals 8. 8's not very big. What is the armor class of a Helmed Horror? It's 20. So the AC is 20. I have to get equal to or greater than to hit the Helmed Horror. So that misses. Okay? But if I make another attack, Helmed Horrors are very hard to hit. They've got a high score. Again, let's do that again. And I rolled a 14. So 5 plus 14, 19. I still miss. It's still less than the 20. So I have to roll at least a 15 or greater to hit the Helmed Horror. And for some reason, oh, there we go. We finally got a dice roll that's pretty decent. So 5. Now this fighter only gets 1 attack per turn, for those of you who are wondering, with a great axe. So 5 plus 17 is going to come to 22. So I strike my target. Hooray! Good news. Now when I strike my target, I get to do damage. So let's have a look at how we do damage. So we cross that all out, and damage for a great axe is probably one of the more awesome things to use when it comes to weapons. But our damage, looking at your character sheet for the fighter with the great axe from the pre-made sheet in the starter set, okay, it is a 12-sided dice. So I find my 12-sided dice, we don't use a D20, get rid of that. 12-sided dice, and we're going to be adding a +3, and that's going to be slashing damage. So 3. Now the 3 represents their strength modifier, okay? Their attack for their damage is their strength modifier. I roll this. I roll the 6. 3 plus 6 equals 9. That is how much slashing damage I do to the Helmed Horror. Now that's provided it doesn't have any kind of special abilities. Unfortunately, our fighter does not have a magic weapon. They're not wielding an animated adamantian weapon. And one of the things with the Helmed Horror is they have damage resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage made from non-magical weapons that aren't adamantian. So that means that you have to have a magical weapon to get through the damage resistance, or an adamantian weapon. I know some dungeon masters, even myself, have decided that it has to be adamantian and magical to get through its damage resistance. That's fine. However you want to do it, it's fine. I understand. But usually the idea is you have to have either an adamantian weapon or a magical weapon to get through the damage resistance. Damage resistance means that instead of taking the full 9 damage, it only takes half. Now, we always round down. We never do a fraction. So half of that is going to be 4.5. You can't have a 0.5. So instead, the Helmed Horror will take 4 damage from the Great Axe. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Okay, so let's move on to making an attack with a ranged weapon. Okay, because there's somebody here with a bow over here. I'm going to use that. Ranged attacks. Ranged. Now I've got a video on how to do melee attack rolls and ranged attacks. You'll find a video It's not hard to find. They're easy peasies. Do a search on my channel and you will find them. Okay, so looking at our longbow, the great thing about our longbow is this character here using the longbow to shoot at one of the helmed horrors. They have a modifier of +7. Now, why is it a +7? Okay, I know a lot of people are going to ask me that question. First off, ranged weapons use dexterity rather than strength usually. Okay, and unless you're using a thrown weapon, that's a different mechanic again. I have a video on thrown weapons as well. So dexterity is +3. Okay, that's the modifier. And we're going to add our proficiency bonus because they are proficient with the longbow, they are trained with it. That's a +2. That comes to 5. But on top of that, this particular character has the fighting style archery, which gives you a +2 bonus to attack rolls when you're using a ranged attack. Okay, so that is what we're going to add in. It's already calculated. That's what the 7 is all about. Okay, so it goes 3 + 2 + 2 and you get 7. That's the number. So we're going to roll a 20-sided dice. Where is this 20-sided dice? We're going to shoot at a helmed horror. Remember, the AC for the helmed horror is a 20. I rolled a 6. So 7 + 6 equals 13. There we go. So as I said, has to be equal to or greater than. So 13 misses the AC of 20. The arrow goes wide, or in some cases, it might have hit the target but never actually penetrated. I know a lot of people get confused, so it is possible for an arrow to strike the target but never actually find a way into the soft tissue, okay? Or to have done anything significant. Maybe it just bounces off. It can be described in many different ways. So we really want to get a pretty good score. We need to get at least a 13 to be able to hit this thing. So I rolled a 15 this time, so we're going to get rid of this because that sucked, right? We want to actually hit this target. So fire the arrow at our helmed horror. 7 + 15 comes to 22. 22 is successful because it's greater than or equal than the AC. Need to get equal to or greater than, so we did that. So we've hit the target. Now we roll for damage. So we're going to get rid of this and roll the damage for our bow. So that's damage. I would advise anybody who is making attack rolls to please roll your attack dice, your 20-sided dice and your damage dice at the same time. It does speed things up considerably, particularly if you have a big group. So I would advise you do something like that. So if you have a look at the middle of this particular character, which is the folk hero, fighter, okay, they have a longbow. That means you use a 8-sided dice to roll the damage. This is the 8-sided dice, and it's a +3. Okay, that's their dexterity modifier. We're using dexterity modifiers for ranged attacks in this case. All right, so let's roll that dice. I rolled a 6, so 3 + 6 equals 9, and it would take 9 piercing damage, the helmed horror. But the arrow's not magical. Okay, so therefore we're using damage resistance again. Because the creature has damage resistance, you're not using a magical weapon, you're not using magical ammo. Therefore, unfortunately for you, you wind up with it being rounded down by half, okay? You take 4 damage piercing on the helmed horror. Another thing a lot of people get confused about, and that is, what about ammunition? When I'm using magical ammunition, that's not a problem. Well, what if I have a magical bow and I fire ammunition that's not magical? Does that still count that ammunition as being magical? And yes, it does. Okay, it's what it basically means is if you have a magical bow, you can pick up any ammunition that can be used with that weapon, and it imbues that ammunition with the property of being magical to get past damage resistance. For those of you who are confused or concerned about that, so that's how that works. Okay. Working our way through, now this is not, you have to be quick now. I'm going to work my way through the questions fairly quickly because I've been here for a long time. Okay, moving through my questions. Okay, cover and concealment we did. Question, here we go. John has a question on, Can you explain the mechanics of climbing a monster? Oh my God, John. Climbing something like a dragon or a giant, can the monster try to shake them off? Absolutely, John, they absolutely can. They should be trying to shake them off on their turn. That would be the smart thing to do. Unless you're dealing with a creature which is, say, legendary, then I would allow them to do it more often as, say, a reaction or as a legendary action in some cases. Does this count as an action for the monster? Thanks. It's really up to you. Okay, if you're the dungeon master and you have a monster and you're having them shake, you have to decide if what they're doing is significant enough that it would burn up all of their movement, all of their action. It could be just classified as an interaction. You can have one free interaction per turn. Okay, now interactions are on page 190. Attack rolls are on page 195 of the player's handbook. So interactions could be something like drinking some wine, but not drinking a potion. That's an action. You can pull out a sword or draw a sword or sheath a sword. That's one interaction. Okay, as long as you do it once. You can't draw a sword. That's your interaction, and then stow it again in the same turn. That would be counted as your action. Okay, you get one interaction. You could pull something from your pack. Okay, depending on what it is. There are lots of different things. Okay, so you decide if it's an interaction or an action to do so. You may decide that the monster can try to shake them free as a bonus action. This is really totally in the ballpark of a dungeon master rather than a player. As for climbing a monster, I would say that climbing a monster is probably going to be done at half speed. So if the creature is quite tall and the character moves 30 feet, they can only climb 15 feet with their movement, and they would have to dash to continue to move up the creature, which would only give them another 15 feet because climbing the creature is going to be considered like difficult terrain. It's halving your speed. Okay, how would you determine how hard it is to climb the creature? I know a lot of people ask me this question. How hard is it to climb a creature? Well, that's again determined by the dungeon master. You know, is the creature quite slippery? Is there lots of things for it that people can grab onto or not? You decide. And all you're going to do is get your players to make an athletics check. It doesn't have to be a strength check. Use the athletics skill. Okay? Make that check to climb something. What is the DC for that going to be? Again, I would say to you, think in terms of what seems reasonable. Numbers that are like a 5 or a 10, I wouldn't even bother with. I would just skip them. But if you're dealing with numbers that are 15, 20, 25, 30, then I would impose those. Okay? Right, so did I cover all the questions with regard to climbing a monster? Can I shake it free? Yes. Now, how would the monster actually go about shaking free a character who's climbing them? What would you use? Okay, so here's the thing. You could use a strength check, or you could do just an acrobatics check. Okay? So strength being athletics, acrobatics being dexterity. Any of those would be suitable for trying to shake them free. What are we going to compare that towards? What are we going to compare that against? We're going to use a contest. That's another type of check. I don't have time to explain that particular type of check. We have already kind of covered that partly in some of these the video content. But that's what I would do, is I'd use a contest and I would compare my dexterity or strength check or my athletics check to the character's opposed check. Whoever gets the highest is going to win. Okay? This is the nature of dealing with a contest. To be successful, for the monster to shake them free, they have to get greater than. Equal to is not going to work. That's for DCs and difficulty class and armor class or AC. Okay? With a contest, you have to do better. So to shake the character free, you have to do an opposed roll, and it is going to be that the creature has to roll better than the player's character to get free. Okay? But you can also use, say it's like doing a grapple check. If you use the mechanics for grapple, it's the same thing as trying to shake them free. Use that mechanic. Use the grapple check mechanics. I think I have covered all of the questions that I needed to. Oh, here we go. Is it Mathis Castro? Question: is it possible to perform a non-lethal long shot, like a shot to the knee? Not in the core rules, no. If you are up close and you reduce the monster to 0 hit points, you can choose to knock them out. Okay? But if you use a long bow or a ranged weapon and you shoot the monster and they go to 0 hit points, they're not knocked out, they're dead. Okay? There's no knocking anything out when you take a long shot. So that's why it's, if you want to knock a creature out and take them prisoner, you want to get up close to do that. Okay, John. Right, cool. I think we covered all the questions. Thankfully, I'm about to lose my voice. But I have to say thank you to everybody who showed up. You did a fantastic job of sticking with me. This has been a long tutorial. It covered a lot of material. Hopefully I haven't made any mistakes along the way. If you like this sort of content, I actually have hundreds of videos on the core mechanics, very short videos, and some longer videos as well. I have videos on how to cast spells. I have a bunch of them. There's at least 40 plus, okay? I have a lot of videos on how to use the different class features as well. If you look through my list of videos, you will find them there. And yes, I do use miniatures and dice and maps. If you want to just check out some of my other content, I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing this sort of thing, the best way to support me to make sure I keep doing this is for lots of people to watch these videos for a long time. The more people who watch them, the more likely I'm going to make more of them. Okay, that's really the reality. The more people who watch them, the more likely I am to make more of them. But otherwise, I have a Patreon page. I have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon. You can also support me through the merchandise shelf underneath my videos or just watching my videos. As I said, watching my videos is one of the good ways of supporting the channel and ensuring that I make more content around that topic. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, for those of you who are wondering, had I gone? No, I'm not. This is the after show. As of today, I am on holiday, which means you may not get that many live streams while I'm on holiday. In fact, it's probably very unlikely. So I thought I would treat people to something I haven't done. I haven't done a combat tutorial or a rules video with dice and miniatures for a long time. So I thought this was a good time to do it. But I do want to sort of acknowledge people who are still in the chat. I know that it's really you guys who make things work for this channel. And the more you watch of these types of videos, the more likely I will make them. I know nobody else does. You almost never see anybody who will go through the different rules for you and explain them in any kind of detail. It's usually talking heads. Okay, I do understand that. I did need to drink some water because I've been talking non-stop. I just want to respond to some of the comments that were made. Yes, I did try really hard to make sure that this live stream was easy to find this time round, so that's why I advertised it as on the community section of the channel a couple of days beforehand. Sean Mullen, how's it going, mate? I think I already said hi to Prep Cook Survive. F Hubbard is here. Joe is here. Overboard DM. Go check out his channel. I do have a lot of battle maps, by the way. This is just one of many. Jean Paul. It's good to know that technical difficulty. Yeah, I've already thought down here. We covered that. Moving along. I think I answered the question on. Okay. First video on. I don't know. We've already answered that. That was a question. I just want to make sure I got everybody. Cordor. Is it? Corridor Gomez. Gomez. Hello, how's it going? Well, I think it's probably one of the better ways. It's not good for me, but it's probably better for other people. I think that most of the shorter content usually gets more views and more traffic than me doing a tutorial, but this does give people the opportunity to ask questions. Somebody asked a question which I've been avoiding for a very long time, which is how to climb a monster and how to adjudicate it. That's probably not a video I'm going to be making anytime soon. So this is not just advice to DMs. This is also for players, okay? Every week. No, I'm not proficient in anything, John Paul. Jason, hi Jason. Did I cover? Yes, we did. We covered that. Yeah, I'm a bit of a fan of trying to get everything down to a D20 range success. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So I would recommend to you that you ditch rolling difficulties of 5 and 10. So 5 is very easy, 10 is easy. I think those are dice rolls that aren't really worthwhile your time. You should just not worry about them as a dungeon master. Unless, of course, you feel they will add something to the game. But I honestly don't think they necessarily do. Joan, I would add leadership skills to group checks, but I don't even know if that skill is in 5e. So if you wanted to make sort of like a leadership skill to try to bring the group together and work better in some way or be successful in something, the easiest way to deal with that is to look at your character sheet, and charisma is probably the one you're after, okay? So use your charisma modifier. So there's a small number and a big number. The big number is the score. The small number is usually the modifier. Use that modifier and add a D20 roll, and that's what you get as your leadership check, okay? To try to be successful. Yes, you could do leadership checks amongst a group, but I would ask what would be the content and the context for doing a group check for leadership, unless you're trying to get people to find out who is going to take over leadership of the group, which seems a little odd, but you could do that. You could also use the performance skill. There is a performance skill which is related to charisma. You can be proficient with performance. It is underneath perception on the character sheet, so you could use that with regard to making a group check around a leadership skill check. Okay, performance or charisma. I look at passive checks as assuming the dice roll was rolled and got a 10. That's exactly what the intention is, F Hubber. The intention is with a passive check is it's as if you have rolled a dice roll and you got a 10. And that's it. I know a lot of dungeon masters get upset when players say, I want to make an active roll. If you're going to make an active roll, Jeremy Crawford has said this before, and that is, if you're going to use a passive check, you can, and you can always use the passive check if you think it applies. But if the player says, look, I would also like to make another check, that check is going to be around something like perception, because it's often the one that they pick, right? So I want to make a dice roll. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take their perception score and I'm going to roll a dice. But what happens if they roll under what their passive perception would be? So passive, I've done videos on this before too, by the way. Perception. Whoops, I'm running out of space. Should have started further back. Okay, so let's assume that there's a modifier for this. We're going to use, in this case, I think the smartest one, we're going to use this fighter here has got a perception score of 3. So if we use 10 as making it passive, that'd be 13. What if the character says, I really want to be able to make a really careful check, and you allow them to roll the dice? So roll the dice. So you get a 3 plus the 2 comes to 5. In this case, the result is less than the passive check. The intention when you're using the passive check is you take the passive check because it's higher than the active roll, rather than you take the active roll. You don't have to do it this way, but that's the intention of the designers, okay? In other words, the passive check is they're never going to get less than that score. All they're going to do is increase the chances of getting a better score. So if they rolled another dice, I rolled a 1, it's much worse. Oh, that's not going to do much good, is it? So that's a bit better. So if I roll the dice, my passive perception is 13 for that fighter, or the ranger over here. 12 comes to 15. 3 and 12 is 15. So this is the better score. That was the passive check. That was the active check. We take that score. Okay? That's how the intention of a lot of passive checks are intended to be used, to stop people from failing things that they really shouldn't be failing. And a lot of the DC 5 and 10 checks are a total waste of time because, frankly, they should be able to achieve them, which is why I suggest you don't use them. Andy, hi Andy. Now Andy, if you are still here, I am using the character sheets from the Dungeon Masters starter set, or the Dungeons and Dragons starter set. So there's a whole bunch of pre-made characters, and if you go onto the Wizards of the Coast website, you'll find all of these sheets here. Okay, they can be downloaded. They're in the Dungeons and Dragons starter set. There's none in the Dungeons and Dragons Essentials kit, unfortunately. And those are the sheets that I'm using. That's where I'm getting my numbers from, for those of you who are wondering. I did point that out at the very beginning, but I can only point it out so many times. I've already covered Jason's question. I'm moving past F Hubba. We normally assume you want the heal and don't want to save versus spell decks to avoid the touch. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. Eugene. Hello, Eugene. You deleted your message. I'm not too sure what that message was, but hopefully you've managed to get it in. I am working my way through here anyway. I've answered Epic Donut's question, I believe. And so, look, there are better ways of doing initiative than the standard way. Trust me, there are better ways of doing it. I've already talked about instant kills. Joe from the US, Flight of the Conchords forever. I'm not actually a actor and not from the Flight of the Conchords, and my name is not Murray, but my father's name was Murray. My name is Fred. Okay, I have no acting ability whatsoever. I'm pretty sure that's definitely the case. Jean-Paul, your question, I am no intention of rolling low on initiative tomorrow during our game. I intend to roll very high, and that still won't help me because you guys will probably still smash all the monsters to pieces. The Robin Hood 305, hello. Right, yeah, Jean-Paul, we use group initiative in our weekly game with Fred. It speeds up our fights, encounters, and keeps the game moving. Yeah, it really comes down to basically, I just get the players to say, okay, if there's a bunch of you who are all going to go before me or before my monsters, just tell me what you can do, roll a dice. Once you told me what you can do, roll a dice, and I'll move on to the next person. That means the flow and the input of information from me to them, from them to me, is faster, and I can get everything done a lot quicker, and it does make things significantly easier to run, provided you can deal with that. I don't know that new dungeon masters will find that so easy. I have a okay, hang on. Yeah, it depends on the distance from the tree. If you have a -1 strength monk, jumping from one tree to the next is going to be very dependent on how far away the trees are. Okay. All right. I think how far is the other tree? Yes, exactly. That's a good question. How far is the other tree, Jean? Story to support the action. Now, here's the thing. I know a lot of people will say, okay, you need to have descriptors. My advice to you as a dungeon master is describe your monster's actions. Do not describe your player's character's actions. If they don't do any description, don't worry about it. Just forget it. They will either pick it up over time as they watch what you do with your monster, but remember, the player is controlling their character, you aren't. So it is better to describe what happens when your monster does something rather than what your players are doing. If your players do not want to describe them swinging the axe or the sword or how they cast a spell, but they just say, I'm casting a particular spell, that's actually perfectly fine. That is still role-playing. Okay, so after speed of when I'm able to jump from a tree to another tree. Yep. So yeah, so if you have a monk that can travel very fast, that doesn't determine how far you can jump across a gap, just to make it clear. Jean, our group are not very politically correct and use too much inappropriate dialogue for Fred to live stream. No, I would get banned very quickly if my group were actually live play, because they, even if I tell them, can you please tone down the language, they just take that as a challenge and increase it. So it doesn't happen, and I just don't have the technical know-how or the equipment to do that. It wouldn't work. It would just all, I mean, sometimes our games just break up just with the video chat as it is. So if I were to record it, it would look awful. And that's just the nature of having lots of people in different locations. I don't have a business level internet connection. All right, so where are we going? Yes, one of brief read through the fourth at a bookstore. No, fifth. Okay, yeah, I've played Dungeons & Dragons 4e. I still think I prefer Dungeons & Dragons 5e. I don't think that Dungeons & Dragons 5e is perfect, but I think it's better than what I was having to contend with at Dungeons & Dragons 4e. But there are a lot of people who enjoyed it. I found the game worked from about level 1 through to level 1 to 8. And then after that, it just became a bit diabolical. As a dungeon master, as a player, players loved it. I found my players had a great old time, but it was miserable for me. Okay, Jean, we've covered cover and concealment. We did that. Just do 40k. All right, what's this? I actually started out playing Ultima and Dragon Warrior's first tabletop Warhammer. I played Warhammer 40k as well myself. Yes, I have played Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2e, not very well though. 3.5 for Pathfinder and a few other games as well. I like the cooperative nature of storytelling myself. It's fun. I think that's one of the things that drew me away from playing tabletop war games and towards Dungeons & Dragons, and why I finally decided to start a channel. And thank you, is it Ortseed7? I appreciate that you love my channel. I'm glad it is working out for you. Yeah, no, it's never going to get live streamed. Never again. Tried that before, and it's not going to happen. We covered non-lethal. Knocking out cam monsters. I hear you, but the guy has been teaching us how to play D&D for years. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know people would like to see me playing the game. There are a few, very few videos, short, that do actually have me running the game and playing the game. But, yeah, they are rare. They don't come up that often. Yeah, we've covered that. Moving through. These tips are golden. I'm hoping that they were at least useful. I know I need to talk more about contests and opposed checks, because people get confused about them all the time. That probably won't be happening today because I'm about to lose my voice, but that's all right because I don't plan to be using it anytime soon. John. John has been watching my stuff for years. And look, I know a lot of people are drawn to my channel because of the Lost Mine of Phandelver. I can assure you, you will continue to get more content on Dragon of Spire Peak, which you may be able to relate to your Lost Mine of Phandelver adventures if you want to. We'll see how it goes. I think there's definitely room for movement on that one, and I think you'll see more videos on the Lost Mine of Phandelver, but it won't be just me. You'll see other people. Matthew Perkins would definitely be an individual you should see showing up again at some point. Yeah, you can. So Kraz ULA, you can, when you're moving, you can break up your movement. So you could, if you wanted to, have your character over here. You could move to here, take a shot, and then continue moving. So you move 5 feet, take your attack, and continue moving. So that'll be 5, and then you take a shot, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And you can move yourself into cover that way. And you can move out from behind cover. I recommend that people use cover. Move in this way. Break up your movement. As long as it doesn't provoke an attack of opportunity, break up your movement, particularly when you're using ranged attacks. That could be a spell, that could be a bolt, that could be an arrow, it doesn't matter. Break up your movement. John, yeah, CRISPR needs more use. It gets neglected. Yeah, lots of things. It can be used a lot more, but yeah, I know. Whoa! Thank you to Regen. I'm going to try and get this name right because $20 is a lot of money. I really do appreciate it. Rage Dice Penguin. Fantastic name. Rage Dice Penguin. Thanks for being you. Thank you, Rage Dice Penguin, for the $20, and thank you for the kind support. I do appreciate it. I do still want to work through the rest of this chat. I know that's not necessarily golden content, but I feel like that that somebody might have said something that was useful, and I'm not at the point where I'm big enough that I can't answer everything. I use performance for a lot of other skills too. Yeah, Bard player, yes, absolutely. The Bard should be using their performance a lot for lots of different things. Hi, Matt Nerdy, how's it going? Constitution has checks, but you can't be proficient in these checks. Concentration checks or exhaustion, absolutely. Yes, Constitution does have a number of checks you can make. This is an ability check. There's very few times that it comes up. If you're playing in a cold environment or a hot environment, you might make a Constitution check. If you are running, doing a marathon run or running for a long period of time without resting, you might use a Constitution check. Dungeon Master sets a DC or difficulty class, and you have to either get equal to or greater than to be successful. Otherwise, you suffer levels of exhaustion, or maybe you lose some of your hit dice or your hit points, whatever they have cooked up for you. Exhaustion's probably the smartest way to apply that, though. Your character is a long distance runner. Yeah, exactly. Long distance running would be certainly a way of applying the Constitution check. Kraz, if I have extra attacks, can I attack, move, and attack, move? Okay, Kraz, it's a good question. You absolutely can. Okay. So, for example, and this can come up from time to time, imagine you have your character here, and they have a speed of 30 feet. You move up 10 feet, attack the Helm Torah, dispatch it or kill it, and you want to make another attack because you've got extra attack and you get 2 attacks. Or you're holding 2 short swords. If you are holding 2 short swords, you can make 2 attacks because it's a light weapon. So if you've got an extra attack or you're using dual weapon fighting, you can then move again, make another attack on the next target. And you can keep moving as long as you have movement speed left. Okay, so absolutely you can do that, and you should do that. Okay, I know that move, attack, move is okay. Yes, it is. I just wondered if extra attack ability needs to be in a row. No, it does not. Absolutely not. So in some cases, you will find as your character gets a lot higher in level that You might have extra attack, which gives you, instead of 1 attack, you get 2 attacks, okay? And if you are dual wielding, so if I had a dual wielding character here, which I don't at present, but let's assume that, say, the rogue, and the rogue wouldn't have that anyway. Let's assume that a character has 2 weapons in their hand, and they're both light, and they have extra attack. That means you get your normal attack with your action. You have extra attack, so you can make another attack as part of your action. And it can be separated when you movement. And if you've got like 2 weapons as well, and the light, then you can make another attack as a bonus action because you used your action to make an attack. Okay? You can't use your bonus action when you're dual wielding to use your bonus action to make an attack and then use your action to do something else other than make an attack if you're going to use the dual fighting rules. You know, 2-weapon fighting requires you to use your action to make an attack to be able to use your bonus action to make that other attack that you want to make with your weapon. Okay? You're welcome. Between your educational videos and the content that the Dungeon Dudes make, I've learned a lot about D&D, and I appreciate the work you have put in. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Yes, Dungeon Dudes explains a lot of rules really well, and all pre-recorded, so both of them are pretty knowledgeable in the game, so that's always nice. And they do their homework. They go through sage advice and stuff like that. Okay, my voice is dead. Okay, I am spent. There's nothing more I could do without passing out. So thank you to everybody who showed up for the live stream. It has been a long video, incredibly long. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.